Welcome to the Back to Health podcast, where we share inspirational stories of hope to help you reclaim your health. If you're suffering from a chronic condition and have been given little to no hope, if you've been told that there's nothing wrong with you, but you know there definitely is something wrong, or if you're just trying to be preventative and want to know how to reclaim your health, then this podcast is for you. I can't wait to share today's episode. Hello, welcome to the Back to Health podcast. I'm your host, Rashani Mahendran, and today we're talking about a really important topic, pelvic health. Now, this is something that I have suffered from personally, and I am really excited to share the information in this jam-packed episode because I think it will help a lot of people, and especially women, prevent a lot of the pelvic issues that can be encountered before, during, and after pregnancy. So if you're a mum that always makes sure you go to the toilet before you leave the house, then this episode is for you. I hope you enjoy this episode with our expert, Esther Stubbs. Esther is known as a no-nonsense, straight-talking physio who is passionate about busting taboos and giving women back the power to heal themselves. Following health concerns herself from a young age, Esther has built a community of women who want and need support with pelvic issues such as prolapse and incontinence. Not only is Esther a fantastic women's pelvic health physio, but she's also an advocate of female empowerment. You are really going to enjoy this show. You're in for a treat. Hi, Esther. Lovely to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for making the time to speak.
Oh, you're welcome. It's lovely to be here.
Brilliant. And today's topic is one that I found to be quite growing in prominence, especially in the last 6 months, which is obviously pelvic health. And for me, more specifically, pelvic health in pregnant women or post-pregnancy, because obviously given the lack of good posture that we've been having while we've been working at home and less opportunities to be out and about and doing physical exercise, it's obviously had a really huge impact on women's pelvic health. Has that been the experience in your, like, have you seen more of those cases, would you say, in the last year as well?
Yes, definitely. I think you're absolutely right. With more people staying at home, being less active, gaining weight as well hasn't helped. And we are seeing a lot more pelvic issues coming through. And I think also a backlog of people who haven't been addressing them normally as they would, because everybody's hesitant, aren't they, to reach out for medical help if they haven't got something COVID related. They,
Yes.
have been holding back.
That's really key. And I think it's like, as we're starting to open up and hopefully going back to what we're doing, it's really important right now to sort of look and reset and improve our overall health. And that is physical as well as sort of immune system and, inner health as well. But I think it'll be really interesting for our audience to get to know a bit more about your story and sort of what led you to this work and how you came to sort of specialize in this particular area.
Sure, of course. I always think it's interesting. Like you say, everybody has a story. And I had no idea that mine was going to lead me here. And only now looking back, do I see the path. So at the age of 5, I actually suffered with a virus called Guillain-Barré, which is a virus that attacks the immune system. And it left me paralyzed as a small child from the waist down. And at the time, they didn't know what the virus was. They had no idea how to treat it. But luckily, with probably some luck and a bit of previous knowledge, they managed to help me to recover to what I thought was fully function. I went to school. I was completely normal. I played lots of sports. It wasn't until I went to have my own child that I realized that even though externally I was fully functioning, I hadn't really 100% gained control of my internal musculature, like my pelvic floor. So that when I actually came to deliver my first child and the doctors asked me to push the baby out, I had no idea. I just had no idea, which led me to have quite a traumatic first birth. And then afterwards, I had to have Ventouse, I had to have forceps, I had a episiotomy. So the recovery was long, and coming with all incorporating that was I was obviously left with some complications of prolapse, incontinence. And that started me on the journey of going to see surgeons, going to see physios, trying to piece back my life, trying to kind of understand what had gone wrong, what I could do to get myself back together physically and emotionally. And even though at the time I was already a physiotherapist, there is actually no learning system in place that discusses the pelvic floor, even on the initial physio course. It's only once you start to specialize do you really understand what's happening to the female body during childbirth and pregnancy. And once I managed to resolve my issues, and realized that it's only when you start to talk about these things that you realize how many people out there. I didn't realize that half of my friends were wearing tenor ladies when they went running, and they were also having these issues. But because nobody speaks about it, and we get those adverts on the TV that say, oh, you've had a baby, put a tenor lady and you'll be fine, do we realize
Yeah, yeah.
that isn't the norm? You shouldn't have to do that. That millions of women are doing that because they just assuming that's what happens. They're just living, suffering in silence, not discussing it. I suddenly decided that, right, I needed to help these women. I didn't want anybody else to suffer like I did. And also, if as a therapist, as a physio, it took me so long to find the right pieces of the puzzle to fix myself, I was like, what chance does anybody else have? You know, they're going to be Googling well into the night. They don't even know what they're looking for or where they're looking for it. And it was there that I decided to create the pelvic power movement community, which at the moment, it only began last year, and it's more than 2,500 people now. Women suffering with these
Wow.
issues that come together to know they're not alone, to discuss their feelings. They don't feel embarrassed. They're not ashamed within the group because they know everybody is on that same journey, and just somewhere where they can find the resources to help them start to get better. So that's really how I
Yeah, and I
ended
think this
up
is so
here.
and this is such a fantastic story, just to highlight just how many women do suffer in silence with lots of conditions, and not just
Mm,
women. I mean, just generally people. Like, you have health issues and you have these things, and you suffer alone, or you're trying to Google and find all these answers alone. But there's a power in sharing, and there's a power in sharing our stories, so that A, we know we're not alone, but B, we can find these answers and share the information together, so we're not trying to like go down rabbit holes and then go down another one, and you're just left feeling exhausted. So I think it's amazing that you've started that movement, and what a wonderful place for women to come together and understand that this shouldn't be normal, but you're not alone in suffering this, and there are potentially answers that can sort of help you sort of overcome what you're facing. Because I remember when I had my daughter, and I was suffering from a diastasis, so where the muscles had
mhm,
separated and they weren't closing, and it was a severe one. So I looked constantly 6 months pregnant because it was that severe. And when I went to the midwife, you have your appointments, and she sort of said, "Oh, you're going to be stuck with that for life. That's your body now. That's what's going to that." And she just sort of she just sort of laughed it off.
mhm,
And I said to her, like, "Is there something I can do? Are there exercises? Do I need to go see a physio? It's quite painful. I'm finding it. I'm finding it painful. What can I do?" And she was like, "Oh, that's just your body now," and just completely laughed it off. And so it led me down the exact same route, like you mentioned, Googling into the night. I found somebody who did specialize in exercises for diastasis and tried to follow some of those. I still found them too painful. And so I then had to go down another route and find somebody else that did exercises that I could do
mhm.
myself, strengthen myself there, find another program. But it is hard work to find the answers that you're looking for. It is not easy to know where to go or where to get that support, because you're just told it's normal. And I think we just really want to just emphasize that none of these things are normal. Like, you wouldn't imagine women in the wild who give birth and then walk around with prolapses or incontinence issues, right? Like, that wouldn't happen. And so it's not normal. It is I don't know if you agree, but I would say it's probably a symptom of our modern lifestyles, and actually not looking after our bodies correctly to begin with. So we only discover the issues when maybe we're too far down the line, and actually it's too late. Is there anything sort of in your line of work that you discover preventatively people can do to avoid these sorts of issues later down the line?
Well, I think the first thing we can do is take care of our bodies during pregnancy, before pregnancy, because, if we're not feeding our body the right foods, if we're not maintaining activity, if we're not practicing relaxation techniques, I think when it comes to the birth, and the birth, especially for the first time, it is scary for anyone. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Doesn't matter how many times you write that birthing plan. Who remembers even what they've written in the throes of labor? So I think more emphasis needs to be put on staying active, and learning how to relax your pelvic floor, because when we are in pain, when we're in stress, when we're anxious, our whole body tenses up, and that is not helpful. For that baby to pass through, for those muscles to relax, for those ligaments and everything to stretch, if we are screaming in pain and we're tensing our whole body, And I think that's what happens. We get to that point, we're all in agony, we're all screaming, and you just want the baby out, don't you? Whereas if it was a more peaceful, probably with your hypnobirthing experience, it's a more calming, peaceful experience. I'm sure there's less trauma because you're allowing that body to naturally do its job rather than in a rush, just want it to end now. And I think it really all stems from trying to change the education initially, and trying to give people more options with their birth that is going to suit them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think one of the key things here is about learning to work with your body and not
Mhm.
against your body. Like your body gives signals and your body does things, and your muscles in particular do certain things like contract, and the intensity of them is there to help you get that baby out. And instead, we're taught to work against them. So when you constrict and when you push against your muscles, you're literally blocking them from
Mhm.
doing what they're supposed to do. And so it can't open to allow the baby, and you're putting more force against it. And that is where some of the damage can actually start. And why I got really interested in this line of work is about understanding actually how we're supposed to work with our body rather than against it, and understand our muscles and actually give them what they need. And so my second birth was miles apart, because
Mm.
you just had such an understanding and almost like faith in your body to be able to do what it does, and you'd given it, like you said, the right nutrition, the right exercise, the right state, you'd stabilized all your muscles that you needed to, and so that it could just do what it was supposed to do. But let's say, like you and I both found ourselves in the first instance, where you've given birth, but you're finding yourself having, or even during pregnancy, having these pelvic issues. What are some of the things that women can do in those instances?
So I would definitely say don't ignore it. Don't just stick a pad in and get on with life and expect it to miraculously disappear. It's not going to. If you're having them during pregnancy, the likelihood is that those problems are going to persist afterwards. So some people are under the misconception that if you start to strengthen your pelvic floor during pregnancy, that it's going to be more difficult to for the baby to come out because those muscles are stronger, and therefore they think they're going to be tighter. But that's a big myth and misconception. What we want is a functional pelvic floor. Just like your bicep is functional, you contract and you relax. If I was to strengthen it, I wouldn't think that then it's not gonna, it's not gonna be able to relax. So what we need to do is
Yeah.
focus equally on the strengthening and on the relaxing. But we can have a tight pelvic floor and it be weak. So a lot of people are constantly in fear, which means they're constantly contracting their pelvic floor, but actually it's fatigued. It's not working properly. It's not getting the oxygen it needs. It's not getting the blood supply you need. So then you just get a very stiff and weak pelvic floor, which can be very painful as well. So it's very difficult because there's so many misconceptions out there. People end up doing the opposite of actually what they need to be doing. So I would definitely say if you're at all concerned, go and see a pelvic therapist, and start to practice your pelvic floor strengthening. You want that pelvic floor to be nice and strong to support you during childbirth, support all your pelvic organs and the baby, and also to have a faster recovery after the birth.
Yes, and I think like this is one of the things I found as well when I was pregnant, is that there's all this emphasis on pelvic floor. You're
Mhm.
told, you hear it, you told about it, but you're not actually given, like I didn't find it very clear or knew exactly what the steps were in terms of what am I actually supposed to do though? Like yes, I must strengthen my pelvic floor, but how do I do that? Like where do I start? And so do you have any tips around like just where you get started or where you start educating yourself even about this?
Absolutely, and I totally agree with what you're saying. So interestingly enough, I have a free Kegel workshop on in our pelvic power movement community, which is 5 days. It's like 15 minutes each day, and I did this so that people could really understand how to activate. And what I found was a lot of people, they can activate certain parts of their pelvic floor. They can't activate so that you've got your back levator ani muscles at the back contracting around your sphincter, but you've got your muscles correcting around your vagina and your urethra. And people will be strong in different areas depending on the trauma they've had. So in the workshop, I explain different positions to activate different parts of your pelvic floor. and explain the breathing that you need to do. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that as you inhale, your pelvic floor relaxes, and as you exhale, it contracts. What you get a lot of people doing is trying to inhale and contract. So we're working against our body. You know, you're making life twice as hard for yourself. So I would say if this is the first time doing your Kegel, your pelvic, so Kegel is a pelvic floor exercise created by a man called Mr. Kegel. That's literally all it is. And the easiest way to describe it is that if you think you're about to pass wind, you're going to squeeze. So we're going to seal the entrance of those external holes, whether it's your urethra, your vagina, or your sphincter, and then you are going to lift. So there's two distinct stages, a squeeze and a lift, and then you want to hold it and then release. So you can either do it quickly, squeeze and lift and relax, or you can squeeze and lift and hold. And in order to actually build muscle and see an effective change, you need to be doing this 3 to 6 times a day. So 10 repetitions, that's a minimum, and at least for 12 weeks. I think what a lot of people think that if they do it a couple of times a day, a couple of times a week, then some kind of magic's are going to occur. But you know yourself, like, you can't diet one day a week and you can't go to the gym one day a week because nothing's going to happen. You need to have consistency. You need to tell your body, right, I want to make a change, and I'm committed to that change, and it needs to work harder.
And this might sound like an odd question, but how do you know if they're working? Because this is one of the topics that like a lot of the women I speak to are like, I'm doing them. I don't know if I'm doing them right, or I don't know if they're working. Like how do you know when they are working, or is there a way to know?
So the best thing to do is get a mirror and take a look at your perineum. What you should see is a squeeze around your anal sphincter, around the vagina, and lift. What I find is that as women fatigue, they might get 1 or 2 great contractions, but then as they say fatigue, the muscles start to dysfunction. They might start holding their breath because they're trying really hard, and then they might start bearing down. And if that happens, what women can often say to me is, you know, I'm doing my exercises, but actually I'm feeling worse after I've done them. My
Mm.
prolapse feels worse. And I say to them, well, I want you to go and have a look, and I only want you to do great contractions. I mean, as practice doesn't make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect. So the quality is far more
Yes.
important than the quantity. And so there's no point teaching a muscle to do the wrong thing over and over again. That's not going to be helpful for you. So you may have to say, right, I'm going to have to do this 10 times a day and just do 1 or 2 contractions until you really have that perfect contraction, and then build it up from there.
Yeah, and it's, something that really interested me when I was sort of learning this for the first time when I was pregnant was, why have we never been taught this before? Like, why have we been never taught about pelvic floor health, and especially as women or, as girls? Like, is there a particular age that you think it's good for our children to sort of start strengthening this particular, working on this particular area? Or is it something that you only work on sort of in your older years? Like, I'm just interested to sort of know that as a parent.
I think um, I think it's really important. You know, when we teach about physical education, I think we should be teaching about pelvic health then, because the pelvic health is so vital to our overall strength, our overall stability. You cannot really detach your core stability from your pelvic health. And one of the things I often say is, don't strengthen your core at the detriment of your pelvic floor. Because a lot of the time when we're doing these core exercises, I mean, you know, with diastasis recti, you're bulging, women are arching their back and they're bulging. And before a baby, they're probably not going to see any symptoms. You know, they might get a painful back. But after you've had a baby, these kind of exercises can be really detrimental because you're bearing down. Those tissues just cannot cope with that pressure anymore. And that diastasis recti cannot cope with that distension anymore. So I think if we were teaching people to have great core stability young, and to sort of activate, so as they exert, they exhale and allow everything to contract, then we'd have less of these issues later on. Because it if we are not in touch with our bodies initially, then it's very difficult once they're broken to understand how they were working when they weren't broken.
Yeah, and you almost take it for granted, don't you? When there's not an issue, or you don't see the issue, maybe there may be an issue, but you don't see it or feel it. You just take that for granted. Like,
Hmm.
I was fine before, but actually there may have been an underlying issue that you just weren't aware of. And I believe that to be the case for my diastasis recti as well, because I obviously must have been something in my posture or something I wasn't doing right before, but it only became an issue after I gave birth, and I was obviously then dealing with the effects of it. And like you say, it is so much harder to go back and try and figure out how it's supposed to be working and how to put it back together and how to fix it. Then I wish I'd had that information in hindsight, so I could have done the right things beforehand. But like we always say, hindsight's a wonderful thing. But it then also just surprised me. Why is this the first time I'm hearing about this? Why were we not taught this, like you say, in physical education? Why are girls not taught about the importance of maintaining them? But even for boys, they need to have a strong core. Like, all human beings need to have a good, strong, functioning core, because it is the basis of everything. And only when I lost that core functioning did I understand the pain and the issues that come with having to live with such a weakened core. Because sometimes, especially when my son got a bit older and I was trying to breastfeed, it was too painful to hold him, to feed him, because I was in agony. I was feeding him in agony because I was still trying to repair and and fix what I was working on. Are there any bits of advice you would give for posture and things like that when it comes to breastfeeding as well? Because I guess that's another area that this sort of lends itself to as well.
Well, I think trying to in any part of your life at any point, you really need to try and maintain a good posture. I think what happens is that I see a lot of women who have spent a lot of time breastfeeding on the sofa. And what we tend to
Yeah.
do is when we sit on the sofa, we kind of, our back is curved. So we're slumped back in this slump position, which gives our pelvis a posterior tilt, and everything is put under pressure. Your pelvic organs are put under pressure. If you've got prolapse, they're going to be put under pressure. The pelvic muscles are also more lax in this position. So some people think, okay, I'm going to do my pelvic floor exercises in this position while I'm breastfeeding. Great opportunity. And a lot of people are told that. But actually, if your pelvic floor muscles are more relaxed in this position, then you've got a lot of slack to take out before you feel the tension. And do we want to be strengthening in this position? Because that's not the position that we need the pelvic floor to be tight. We need it to be tight when we're upright. We need it to be tight when we're lifting and carrying. Not, we need the pelvic floor to be relaxed in this position. That's its natural position. So I definitely say try and look at the way you're holding your baby. Always carrying it on one side can lead to hip hitching. So you get tighter muscles on one side, which can affect your pelvis, affect your back. Look at the way you're carrying the baby. Are you rounding your back? How is your neck? A lot of us, our breasts enlarge. You're carrying more extra weight then if you're breastfeeding too. All these things predispose you to issues. So I would try and sit in a more supportive chair, maybe pop a cushion behind your lower back if you're sat on a sofa, and try and change your position regularly. Staying in any position too long is not great for us. Maybe think about sitting on the floor with your legs cross-legged, feeding the baby as an alternative, or lying down. There's lots of different ways to do it. But I think for a parent, when you first have a baby, you're exhausted, aren't you? You're only too glad just to have a rest on the sofa. But I think just being aware, so maybe try these other postures earlier in the day when you've got a little bit more energy, and then allow yourself a little rest on the sofa in the afternoon. But just be,
Slouch on the sofa.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But just be, I think it's awareness that is the most important thing. If people are aware of what they're doing, then they're more likely to change. And think about, when they're doing the activities, you do a lot of lifting and carrying with a baby, don't you? Constantly. Car seats are very heavy. They're always on one side. It's very
Yes.
difficult to carry them centrally. Make sure that you are contracting your pelvic floor when you're lifting, you're exhaling, you're not holding your breath, and just really pay attention to your breathing. I teach an incontinence course, and one of the modules we do is on breathing, and the fact that if you breathe into your belly all the time, that can cause diastasis recti, because you're constantly exerting that pressure on the belly where we should be breathing into the rib cage. Diaphragmatic breathing, 3D breathing. And if we don't have that mobility in our chest and our rib cage and our back, because we're constantly at a desk or feeding. You're not going to get that expansion, which means that your belly and your body, so your pelvic floor is going to have to take that expansion, and your abdominals, which you don't really want to, and that's when we start to get some problems as well. So people that belly breathe can often have more issues.
And it is interesting because that is what we are taught to do. We are taught to breathe into our bellies, deep belly breath. And that's sort
Mm.
of what we're taught. And it's so interesting because it really does work against our bodies. And I think you've taught me more in the last like 20 minutes than I've done with all the reading and all the books and everything else that I've been trying to get on this topic. So, no, thank you so much for sharing that, because this is a really important topic for anyone who's either considering having a child, is pregnant, or you've had a baby. I think the quicker that you can get on to understanding how this works, because I know what it's like to suffer from this issue, the better and easier it is to then fix those issues. Because I'm still it's it's 5 years, no, nearly 6 years on, and I'm still I'm in much better shape and much stronger physically, but I'm still working on it, and I still have to work on it every single day. So it is a long road. It's not easy. But that brings me to a question of, I know from the women I've spoken to who have been in a similar position or have been suffering from prolapse or anything like that, you can sort of start off on some of these exercise programs and expect like, oh, 5 weeks time or 10 weeks time, I'm gonna get it back. But what is a realistic amount of time to expect to have to work on some of these issues to bring you back into sort of good form?
I think it really is dependent on your body connection, how well in tuned you are with your body. It also depends on your function of your pelvic floor. So if we look at a muscle, we'd expect on average 12 weeks if you're carrying and committed to your pelvic floor exercise regime. But if you have a pelvic floor dysfunction, so you're not actually contracting appropriately or properly, then I would expect at least 6 months of a committed program. So you're right, it's not a quick fix. There is no quick fix. And I think women have to, it's difficult for women because they're not used to prioritizing themselves. They're not used to making their self-care top of their list, making time for themselves. And they just brush everything under the carpet and get on with it. And it's only when it becomes a serious problem that they start to take action. And unfortunately, it's not too late, but you know, the recovery would have been so much quicker if they'd taken action earlier with anything, you know. Sadly, when I used to work in the NHS, the patients that I'd get, by the time they'd gone through the waiting list, they were so far down the line that they were so chronic, it took forever to recover. Whereas now I work in private practice, people come much quicker and they recover much quicker because, our body has muscle memory, it learns. So, and we also identify with our problems. If we identify with, I'm a mother that's had a traumatic birth and I've got damage down there, you have to actually let go of that identity to move forward physically, emotionally, and mentally. You know, you need to see yourself as that fit, active, healthy woman, not as that downtrodden, damaged individual, in order to make some serious progress. So we do really focus on the mental and emotional. I'm very holistic. We do a lot of meditations to help releasing with fear, anxiety, and worries, because I think, we have to overcome both to actually properly heal and recover.
I think that's such an interesting point, and one I totally agree with, because like I say, my journey's about 6 years in this, but it wasn't because I wasn't working on it like committed as you say, but also it took me a really long time to identify that, okay, this is a really serious issue and I do have to now do something about it. Because I'd asked for that help initially when I first sort of saw what had happened to my belly, and I was sort of laughed off and said, oh, that's your body now, that's what's going to happen. And so then I was so focused on keeping my tiny human alive and fed and all the night feeds. And I was, when you're breastfeeding, you're the one that has to do all the nights, and you're doing all the days, you're doing everything. So exhausted, had another baby. And so that was like 3 years into the journey. And it was only until, like you say, it got so bad that I was like, I can't even pick him up to feed him, I'm in so much agony, I'm definitely going to have to do something about this. So by that time it was already, way too far down the line. But then there was exactly what you said. emotionally and mentally overcoming that image of I am now this mum who has this issue and I'm just weak and I cannot pick up the things, I can't pick up the water bottles, I can't, I can't do that stuff. I'm just like you said, it took committing to that decision of no, I am going to be a strong woman and mum again. I am going to be able to turn my body around. Until I actually committed to that particular decision and view of myself, I didn't actually see the progress. The progress only started when I had emotionally committed to enough of this, like enough of being that poor mom that looks 6 months pregnant, that can't, I'm just struggling and I'm having to get my husband to carry all this stuff because it really hurts to carry stuff. And like, no, I am going to turn this around and I'm going to work on myself. Like, it's time for me to work on myself. And I think I would say about within 6 to 8 months, and again, I wasn't like totally every day, but as much as I could, 6 to 8 months, I definitely felt the difference. So that has been huge. If there's anyone out there who's listening to this and thinking, I need to do something about this, like this, yeah, I think it's time. Where would you recommend they start? What can they do to start themselves off on this journey?
So I would say if you're looking for support, come and join us at the Pelvic Power Movement community. And go and see your local therapist. I'm based in Stamford in Lincolnshire, but obviously there's hundreds and thousands of therapists all over the country. You can see them on the NHS, and there's also private ones if you want to get seen, sooner. If you've been suffering for a long time, then it's worth the investment to get you started, to get you on your progress. And then if you're struggling to find the money, go to the NHS as well. But in the meantime, you'll have something to be getting on with. You'll have a good idea of what your issues are and how you can start to help. The great thing about our group is that everyone is so great at answering people's questions. They, love to give their advice. They love to give their support. And the difference between our group and other pelvic groups is that I'm monitoring the conversations. So I'm ensuring that the advice they're giving is accurate. I don't allow, people to come on and give incorrect advice or detrimental advice. We're having honest, open discussions, but I like things to be factual, and I give a lot of information. I give webinars on there, workshops on there. So I do blogs and downloads so that people can come and find and start to really understand the missing links, the pieces of the puzzle that they don't really understand. So they're not sure on what path they need to take to improve their bodies.
That sounds like a fantastic space to start, and I wish I'd found it sooner, sort of, or earlier in my journey. But I will be sure to check that out. And please do, if you feel you're suffering from any of these things, and even if you think it's just mild incontinence, that can be the start of like other issues. So it's best, as we said, don't just put the tenor lady on and just get on with it. Do start looking at these issues now so that it doesn't get worse as you as you progress down your journey. Are there any other last? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say some great ways to know that if you're starting to adapt because you're worried, because some people make these tiny little adaptations to their life without even noticing because they're concerned or worried about things. So if you find yourself doing things like just in case peeing, that's what I like to call it. I'm just going to pee just in case, because if I go somewhere and there's no toilet, or I'm about to sit down to eat, or I'm going into a meeting, or I'm making a phone call, and you're doing this just in case peeing, that is an indication that you're not confident in the strength of your pelvic floor. So it's a good indication that you might want to check it out. Also, something that people are doing that is when you go to the toilet and you're in a rush and you force your urine out, that can be detrimental to your pelvic floor. You need to relax. We need to relax the bladder and allow it to empty naturally. If you find you can't empty your bladder, then just do a little jiggle or a dance on the toilet seat, because some of the urine, especially if you've had a baby, can get trapped. So yeah, you might get up. A lot of people do suddenly feel like they still need a wee like 30 seconds later, and that's just because you've just trapped a little bit of urine. So just give a little jiggle before you get off the toilet, and that should help. So just noticing little patterns or adaptations is a good indication if you need to start seeking help.
And these are some of the things that we sort of just do, especially as busy mums, just like, oh, I'll just do that because that's part of the thing. And you're telling your child to go to the potty. So yes, I'll go to the potty, like I'll go to, and it just sort of becomes part of your routine without you even realizing that that's what you're doing. So I think that's an amazing thing to spot, to sort of say those are the early signs that maybe you're not as confident in your pelvic floor and your muscles as you should be, because it shouldn't be something that we should have to worry about. But unfortunately, it is the symptom of the way that we live in the modern era. Thank you so much for such an insightful episode. I think there's so many great takeaways here, and I hope this has helped lots of women who are listening in particular, but also partners. If you're listening and you spot any of these signs, then support your partners to deal with these issues, because it is really hard sometimes to admit that you're suffering from it. Also, just because so many people do suffer from it, it almost becomes normalized. I remember once when we were in the middle of a conversation, and when you're sort of running to the loo because you're like, oh, and one of my aunties said, I know, she gave me that wink because she knew what I was dealing with. And it almost has become so normalized that you just sort of, everyone gets on with it, and we shouldn't be, because the long-term effects of leaving it, that can be very, very detrimental. Are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to leave the listeners with before we end today's episode?
I just say, try and talk about it to as many people as you possibly can, and pass this message on to your children, because it's still very much a taboo subject that we don't speak about. And only by discussing it and vocalizing it and bringing it out to the public are we going to make lasting change. So I would just say, please don't be shy. It's perfectly natural. And the more we talk about it, the more normal it will become, and the further progress we'll make.
I love that so much. Thank you so much, Esther. And if you'd like to check out more of Esther's work, we'll be adding all the links below this episode in the show notes. And if you'd like to catch any more episodes of the Back to Health podcast, you'll find the links there as well. Thank you so much for listening. Stay happy, stay healthy, and stay informed. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you would like any of the links or the show notes, you can follow them in the description below. And for more episodes of the Back to Health podcast, please be sure to follow us on YouTube, or you can follow us on Spreaker, where we host our podcast. Thanks again, and I look forward to joining you for another episode of the Back to Health podcast. Until then, stay healthy, stay happy, and stay informed.